Hello folks and welcome back to Nuby Plays Gaming and to the first episode for this little Crusader Kings 2 tutorial. Now the focus of this tutorial is going to be showing off the Norse up in Denmark in the early Middle Ages start. Now this tutorial is being done with all of the current DLC that's out as of August 2018. Now, one thing about this game, there is a lot of DLC, so if you do become interested in this game and are looking to check it out, I would recommend checking it out during a Steam sale. A lot of the DLC is worth it, it's a lot, so I do generally recommend checking this out during a Steam sale. Now, because of the DLC that we do have here, we are able to start in the early Middle Ages in 769 AD. So that's where we're going to start. Clicking on it, it gives a little description about the early Middle Ages. Pretty much started with the fall of the Western Roman Empire in the early 5th century. Yada, yada, yada. And it also gives us a variety of recommended places to start. But we're going to go with custom game setup, because that's one of the great things about this game is you can take different approaches. Now, Crusader Kings 2 is pretty much a game about dynasties. You can choose different characters to start. As you can see, there's also some bookmark dates here that you can choose. So, for example, we have early Middle Ages, the Viking Age, which is a little bit beyond that, the High Middle Ages, William the Conqueror, and then it continues on from there with various different interesting characters that you can choose. So right now, the early Middle Ages gives us that list that we saw earlier. Now, the current map that you are viewing right now, which, if we zoom out, shows from India up to Northern Asia, around the Russian area, all the way through most of Europe and parts of Africa. Now, the current view is the terrain view, which pretty much shows how it looks based on the terrain. The current year, the 1st of January, so obviously there's a lot of snow in this area. You can switch over to the realm view, which gives you all of the various realms that are currently around the world. For example, the Byzantine Empire is one of the biggest empires here, though actually the Abbasids are probably bigger, it looks like. Now, another view is the count view, and that shows you the various counts that are in control around here. So a count is pretty much in control of a county. For example, easiest way to look at it is either the upper areas of Denmark here. You have lots of individual counts that only have one county. You have barons as well. A baron is actually in control of like a city. You can't play those though, at least not usually. I believe you can play them with the republics, which you can see here, the list of republics at this start date, but we're not going to be getting into those, at least during this series. Eventually, when I learn more about them and feel more comfortable with showing it off, I'll show that, but for the time being, we're going to be sticking to the Norse. Now, the various counties that are around here, you don't generally want to start as a count because it gives you quite a difficulty. For example, this young ruler here, if you look, he's pretty much impossible to play. He has a base score, which is the base difficulty score, is 50. Being a count gives a plus 20%. Vassals, the number of vassals he has only reduces it by 1%. He's a young ruler, which gives a plus 18% to the difficulty. And he has a small dynasty, which adds another 10%. Your dynasty is the number of people that are in it, so in your name or whatever. So that obviously adds difficulty to it. Now dukes. Dukes determine they are pretty much the ones that are above counts. So for example, it's kind of like a state if you're from the US. So a county would be like the New York area, metropolitan area, or the Chicago metropolitan area. Then the duke would be the state. Kings would be the actual country, so the United States, for example. Now, we don't have too many kings in a lot of these places because a lot of these places start out broken. As you can see up in most of the United Kingdom and Ireland, there's no kings. There is one of Pictland here. Pictland is kind of like a primitive Scotland sort of area. Now, we do have kings in West Francia and Middle Francia, the Carlings, which lead into Charlemagne, I think. Or are Charlemagne? Carloman? I don't quite remember how that all goes into it. I think Charlemagne might actually be a little later. I admit I don't know my French history very well. Oh well. But yeah, kingdom is a much larger area to control. And certainly kings generally have a bit easier time. And then from kingdoms, it goes up to empires. We don't have a view of that screen on this screen, but a good example of that is the leader of the Byzantine Empire. At least during this start, you only have like about 3 major empires: the Byzantines, the Arabian Empire, and then who's the last one around here? Umayyad Sultanate. I thought there was one more empire hanging on around here. But let's see. Realms? That's not one of them. He's just a king. Because as you can see, the little outline that's here showing off the character, that determines what they are. So if you have this big purple and gold and green surrounding their character portrait, that shows them as a leader of an empire. So this guy has it, the Caliph Al-Mansur. Same thing, except it's blue instead of, or purple instead of green for the leader of the Byzantine Empire. Oh my god. I guess there's really only 2 empires, it looks like, from everything that I can tell. Yeah, because he's a king as well. Okay, so I guess there's only 2 empires at this start date. Eventually there'll be more empires. For example, with the Danes that we'll be using here today, eventually they'll be able to form the Scandinavian Empire as part of Denmark, Sweden, Norway, that sort of thing. But we have a lot of work to do. Now, the start that we are doing here will be starting with King Haraldr Wartooth of the Skjold dynasty. But we're actually going to change it up. We're going to, well, I think we'll save the ruler designer for a later date. Perhaps in more of a fun campaign, since this is more oriented towards being a tutorial. So we'll actually just start out with him overall, King Haraldr Wartooth, who is the ruler of the petty kingdom of Sealand. Completely forgive me for my pronunciations here. It's going to be a bad time with these pronunciations. But we'll be starting with them. So we'll go to play. The next screen here is the game rules screen, which shows various different options that you can choose. One of which is a Aztec invasion. That comes from one of the DLCs, the Sunset Invasion DLC. Whereas the Aztecs decide to invade Europe. Now you can choose when it starts. You can turn it off completely, have it start in 13th century, random, though at the earliest 50 years after the game is started. Delayed random, earliest would be at the year 1000. And yeah, so a lot of different options here. The only major difference that I'm doing with the basics, or outside of the basic rules, is Shattered Retreat I have off. Now, the person that I learned how to play Crusader Kings 2 from, Arumba, he plays with it off because it makes it easier to take out enemy armies. It allows it more easier for your armies to be destroyed as well, but hopefully we'll do everything right here and we won't have to worry about it. So let's get started. We're doing this as under Iron Man mode so that we can get achievements, and it's also going to disable As you can see, you cannot manually save the game. And you also can't use the console as well for cheats or anything. So we're going to be going at this full throttle. So let's get started. Now, I did start a game earlier of Iron Man Slesvig to show things off, but I wasn't really happy with how the video came out. So we're going to be starting a new Iron Man game here with Sealand, and hopefully it goes well. We're going to wait for it to load here. And we're almost there. Alright, so the first little screen is a Welcome to Crusader Kings 2. Tells you a lot of the basics about what Crusader Kings is and that sort of thing, which is a good thing. Apparently this screen was not always available, so learning about this game definitely took a lot of trial and error. The next screen tells you about the Norse, Germanic, Tribal, which are the various things that relates to us. We are the Norse culture, which says that we can raid overseas with ships, rulers can raid infidel neighbors for loot, and we can raise runestones up until the year 1150. Now we're a tribe as well, a Germanic tribe that we can hold tribal and fort holdings without penalties, can build temples, tribal and fort holdings, use prestige to build tribal holdings, can call tribal government vassals to arms instead of using the liege levies, and we don't get taxed, or we don't get vassal tax from tribal government vassals, which kind of hurts our income, but we'll get into that in a moment. Final little thing is we are of the Germanic belief system, which means that priests who hold temples can inherit titles, they can marry, women may own temple holdings, fleets can navigate major rivers, which is a big bonus for raiding, rulers can raid infidel neighbors for loot, vassals do not mind if their levies are raised, Germanic men can take up to 3 concubines, very good for expanding your dynasty. Non-pagans have a very low supply limit, which pretty much gives them a lot of attrition when trying to invade your areas. Rulers lose prestige if we're at peace for too long. The date for this is if you're at peace for 2 years, you start to lose prestige. But it's easy to sort of go to war with raiding armies and that sort of thing. Now, the Germanic religion can be reformed. For that, you have to hold certain territories, do some manner of event for that, and that creates a few differences for the Germanic religion. There does not exist a religious head for this, nor can there exist one. So even if you're reformed, I don't believe there's going to be a religious head. Now, women may hold spymaster positions in this religion, which can be useful because it gives you more options for people to choose, and generally women do kind of tend more towards the spymaster related traits because a woman gives her intrigue score, which helps with spymaster, to her husband, so that's always a helpful thing. Bad things about Germanic: we suck at conversion, and we can't declare holy wars. Now, let's get started. Alright, so currently we have the terrain view. I generally like to operate in the realm view, which gives you a sense of where we are. So, as you can see, all of the territory that's in this light red, sort of darker pink, all of that from Vestfold all the way down to Blekinge to Slesvig, that is all territory that we are sort of in control of. Now, keep in mind, because we are a tribal government, we don't really have direct control. So if we go to war, we're not able to raise armies from those ones directly. The only ones that we can raise directly from are the ones that we have direct claims on. So we have 3 claims here: a petty kingdom of Sealand, the chiefdom of Sealand, and chiefdom of Finn. Now, those 2 chiefdoms that we have are where we can raise armies directly. And it's also where we want to kind of focus on building up our forces there. Now, the bad thing: our guy is old, his queen is old, they're not going to be having any more children. So our current children are going to be the ones that we pass our legacy down to. We have Prander of Slesvig, who's currently in control of these two territories. And we have Hroker of Skane, who's in control of these two. These guys up here, well, let's see. One guy has Pelamark or Delamark, however you pronounce that, and Agdir. And then Vestifold is a separate guy as well. Those guys are just sort of our vassals, nothing too major. Now, let's see. What is our current, I guess, where do we want to go from here? Well, as an old man, we already have an heir, so there's nothing that we can really do with that. We can work on building a war chest, which would involve doing some raids on perhaps Holstein here, or maybe Varend. Holstein would be more profitable, but the one problem is, as you can see when we look at the Scalan tribe, we don't have ships right now, which makes raiding a little bit more difficult. So, for that, we may want to actually get preparations done to expand what we have. So, you will look up here and see that your wealth, your prestige, and your piety, those are like your three main currencies in this game. Wealth is obviously money, and that relates to a couple things that we can upgrade in the keep as a Germanic tribe. Prestige goes to pretty much everything else because we're a Germanic tribal nation. So eventually we'll be able to build a shipbuilder, though there's actually an event that gives you ships. Then we can do a training grounds, war camp, practice range, that sort of thing. All of which give various bonuses to the troops that you can field out around the area and that sort of thing. Right now, I think we're going to start on the market village in Sealand. Reason for that is it's going to increase our tax income, because if you hover over the wealth, you'll see the monthly balance is currently 0.67. It's very disappointing. If we build the market village right away, it's going to eventually expand that. So we'll start with that. And it'll be good because we'll be able to keep our troops out longer with greater tax income. Now, as we're doing that, because we're building in Sealand, we'll go up to our council screen here and select our steward. Now, the steward has, along with all of our other counselors, they all have various missions that they can go on. The ones to the far left are sort of their default missions that they do. Now, our steward, Prander, he can administer the realm, which has a couple of different possible outcomes there. Settled tribes, nothing we really have to worry about right now. But that has to do with pretty much spreading your culture. So the Norse culture, for example, for us. Oversee construction. Now that's the one that we're really looking for, but we'll talk about it in a moment. Finally, our steward can build legend, which increases our monthly prestige and also has a chance to raise some warriors for us. But we're going to hold off on that. We want oversee construction. As you can see, it reduces the local build time modifier by 22.5%, which is going to turn this from currently 29th of December 769 is when it's going to be complete. So 362 days. That is going to change it to 280 days. It's not going to update on when it says it's finished until we start moving. Okay, apparently, there it goes. So finished on the 8th of October, 769. So a few months difference. Now what else are we going to do? Well, one thing, if you're ever wondering what you need to do in Crusader Kings 2, because as you can see, there's a lot of things going on. You have all different windows here. You have your various items going on here. You have a window here that shows your current, what's called domain, which is pretty much your direct holdings, which is the Sealand and Finn tribes for us. And you're also your council, which shows what your counselors are up to. Down here is pretty much all of the different filters. So it goes from terrain all the way over to de jure empires. So de jure empires, for example, was the empires that we were talking about. Byzantine Empire is all around here, at least according to the de jure. De jure pretty much means what it is sort of like by law, but not necessarily what it is de facto, where de facto is actuality. So for example, we are the petty king of Sealand, but the petty kingdom of Sealand doesn't actually encompass all of this by de jure. By de jure, it's only actually this little area. But because we are a petty king, or pretty much a duchy sort of title as a duke, and we have the highest title, we're able to control this whole area. Now eventually, say our son decided to declare independence, he could form the duchy title for Sealand here, which is this whole area. But as king, we want to eventually form the title King of Denmark. So if you click on like Sealand here, which is where our capital is, you have the petty kingdom of Sealand, what we currently own, and then there's the Kingdom of Denmark, which is the de jure area of this where we control. Now we can actually create this title. The problem is though, we don't have the piety needed to create it, nor do we have the money for it. And we're probably not going to make it because we're 78. We're going to die in a couple years, if not by the end of the year. But for this, you need to also control 2 duchy titles. We only have the one as the petty king of Sealand. So that becomes a problem as well. Alright, but we do have the territory that's needed for it at least. The only ones that we don't have are Halland and Burgundaholmer. Burgundaholmer is here and Halland is there. Those are both controlled by King Oder. Does that mean that this is separate? And this guy is part of that. Okay, so there's some weird holdings going on around here. So let's see. But if you're ever wondering, going back to what I was talking about a couple minutes ago, if you're ever wondering what you need to do here, well, at the top, you have all of these little circles that show up. Those are pretty much your alerts that tell you what you can do. Now we know the one title that can be created, the Duchy of Sealand. We can create that, but we need money. We don't have the money for it. Now we can choose an ambition. We have a few different options here. Become exalted among men, become king of Denmark, see the realm prosper, which involves being at peace for 5 years, or build a war chest. I think of all of the options here, probably our most possible one would be building a war chest. Still probably not going to happen by the time we die though. Now another part of this is we can also choose our focus, which is the next little alert that appears up here. As you can see, we have 5 different options here, each of which, well, no, 10 different options, but 5 each relating to the different traits that we have. So diplomacy has 2 related to family and carousing. Martial is related to war and hunting. Stewardship relates to business and rulership. Intrigue is related to intrigue and seduction. And finally, learning is related to theology and scholarship. Now, since we're perhaps looking to grab some territory around here, I think we're going to go with War Martial. It'll raise our martial score to 13, which will increase the number of troops that we can field. So we'll take that. Next, we have special title actions possible. We can set Crown Focus in either Finn or Sealand. Now, Crown Focus is something I don't think was originally available at the start of the game. But pretty much what Crown Focus is it gives a chance for that particular province, whether it's Sealand or Finn, that are directly under your control to become prosperous, which adds to their tax income. And I think it may have other ramifications also, beneficial ones, of course. There's never a bad thing about doing Crown Focus, so you always want to make use of it. In this case, we'll use it on Sealand, which is our capital, since that's also where we're building that market village. Finally, we have special minor titles available. Currently, the only one that we can do is the designated regent of Sealand. Who do we have here? Probably I'm thinking we'd want to do it to someone who is a decent, at the very least, likes us. So looking at the options here, I guess we'll go for Hiroker, our son. So we'll make him the designated regent in case we become incapable or anything like that. Now, one thing I noticed while going through that, I noticed that our sons suck as far as their martial score goes. So Hiroker here has 1 martial, and Prander here has 4 martial. So they're not even as good as we are at 10. And 10 is, honestly, it's not the greatest either. Me personally, I like to have at least around 15 martial skill on your characters, particularly for the Norse. Reason for that is the Norse do a lot of raiding, and they do a lot of subjugation, because we can do the subjugation war at least once during our lifetime. Now, speaking of subjugation, I think we're going to look for an option to do that around here. Probably our best bet is to do it against Vestergotland here, or perhaps Hrothgar. One of them would probably be our best bet. I'm leaning towards Vestergotland because it has Holland, which is a location that we need for our kingdom, and they don't have as many army levies directly available. So King Oder, he currently has 2 chiefdoms and he has 736 troops. Holland is controlled by Hrafen. It's the only place that he has 782. Now if we look at our direct holdings, we can directly bring forth a little bit over 1,000 troops. But the important thing, because we are tribals, we can go to our military screen and do what's called calling allies to help us, which will bring forth your vassals to aid us. If we look at Skane here, he has 547 troops. Over here, 752. Up north, 560. And finally here, 411. So I think we have overall enough troops to do this pretty well. So we are going to right click. Oh, now one thing to note, if you're declaring a war and it's a war against someone who has a liege and it's not the same liege as you actually have to declare war on the liege. So we'll click up to his liege, right click to declare war, and we're going to do a war of subjugation. King Haraldr gains 100 piety if we win, 100 prestige, and King Oder loses 100 prestige, 100 piety, and then they are subjugated. So let's do this. Hopefully it goes well, and hopefully we have enough money to do this, because that can sometimes be a problem. But I want to do this because it's going to give us an opportunity to grab more territory, which is going to be a very good thing. So let's start. And as you can see, we automatically get a little alert called we can call in allies. So we're going to go right there. If we hover over it, it shows our 4 allies that we can bring forth. And it pretty much says all will be likely to accept. So we'll click on that. We'll go to the military screen. You'll see the from domain screen gives us 100 or 1156 to bring forth. So we'll raise our personal levies and we'll move them all to Seyland. Now one thing I want to check, so Haraldr is actually leading troops right now. I'm going to disable that because he's our king, and even though 13 is a little bit more decent war score, or martial score, war score is an entirely different thing. I don't exactly want to do that just yet. Alright, so we have all our forces in Sealand. We'll merge them. Shortcut is G, or you can just click the little merge icon. Now our troops are currently being led by Heising here, who's our commander. He has 15 on his martial score, which is pretty decent. Again, you know, it's pretty much what the minimum is that I'm looking for. And we'll move our troops over to Skane next. And we're getting a bunch of little notifications up here that are saying pretty much that all of our vassals are joining our request for assistance. Now we have 2 different messages that show up here. High priority You know, obviously most important ones. And then low priority. We'll go over more of those later, but for now, just know that those are where the messages show up. Now, one thing I do want to check, because we have troops out, they're going to be taking a little bit more income from us. So as you can see, they're taking about one, I guess, ducat is what the money is actually called around here per month between our income and then our expenses. So we have about 20 to 21 months to get things going. Oh, but we randomly got some wealth there. I don't know where the wealth came from, but okay. I'll take it. All right. So we have a problem here. As you can see, there's a little like exclamation mark next to this castle. Reason for that, they have more defenders here than we do attackers. So that's going to be a problem. But eventually we are joined by the rest of our forces, and we now have more attackers than defenders. And the siege can progress normally. So we'll speed this up a little bit. Generally, when you're in a war, I don't like to speed it up more than 3. Alright, so we got a little message from our spy master. I believe that one of your vassals can be discouraged from associating with conspiratorial factions if the proper leverage is obtained. How do you wish to proceed? Now that this is our son, we can threaten him or we will do nothing for now. I don't think we need to necessarily do anything right now. Our council isn't discontent, so they can't join any factions anyways, so we'll do nothing for now. Now, councils we'll get into more later. They're not necessarily a major factor, at least yet, because we're a tribal nation. Eventually, as we perhaps become feudal, councilors will become more of a factor, but for now, nothing too big to worry about. Alright, so currently we have a little bit more than 2,000 attackers, so we should have this castle pretty soon. There is a battle going on over here. Unfortunately, our allies kind of failed there. Alright, so we took the castle that was here, and because that was the only holding, you will see that there is full stripes on this whole area. That shows that this area is under our control. We'll now move. Let's see, they're heading to Skane. We'll just head and take the rest of their territory. Can Skane defend themselves? Oh, they're heading for our capital, apparently. Alright, now we got another little event that came up. History is a subject that has always fascinated you, and you have spent the last few weeks studying the campaigns of Alexander the Great. There are many lessons to be learned from his conquests in the East. I should devote more time to studying this, which gives us a student of strategy trait or effect. Effect is technically what it is, which increases our martial score by 1. Alright, the defenders here, they have even less than they did in Holland. So that's a good sign for us. Even if they take our capital here, we should be pretty well set. Oh, and it helps if you unpause it as well. Now, one of the things I was going to mention earlier, I don't like to put it further than 3 blips up as far as the speed goes when you're at war, because a lot of things can change pretty quickly, especially if they bring forth mercenaries. Mercenaries are like one of the worst things to deal with in Crusader Kings, because you can have an army of like up to like 4,000 something sometimes show up immediately, and then you got a problem. But fortunately, this guy is relatively poor. He's like us. He only has like 30, so nothing to really worry about. Now we've gotten a message of an offer of peace. To the magnificent King Haralder, blessings upon you. We surrender under these terms. We gain piety and prestige. King Odor loses piety and loses prestige, and King Haralder subjugates King Odor of Vestergotland. So pretty much he is surrendering to us completely, giving us what we're looking for. We'll accept. Ends the war, and we're all good. Now, I do have this little icon that came up saying that we are threatening. Now, threat is pretty much something that's determined based on various actions that you take, generally war, against other nations. I think it may be all war. Pretty much what threat does is it means that other forces can form defensive pacts. And those defensive pacts are very bad if you're planning to do subjugation. But we can only do one subjugation per lifetime. We've already done it, so we don't really have to worry about it too much. But we'll probably go into defensive pacts and threats more later. Now we can also press de jure du